The horse refused to move. When they looked closer, they couldn't believe what was underneath. The early autumn morning was cool, with a mist lingering over the hills of Willowbrook Farm. Amber Fields, the farm's young owner, had been up since dawn, tending to her horses. She found solace in the rhythmic chores of feeding, grooming, and riding her loyal herd. Her favorite horse, Thunder, was a majestic black stallion with a proud stance and a fierce intelligence in his eyes. Amber had raised Thunder since he was a foal, and their bond was unshakable. Before we continue with the video and dive deeper into the incredible story, I want to ask for your help. I'm aiming to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and your support would mean the world to me. If you've been enjoying this content, please hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. And let me know where you're watching from in the comments down below. That morning, as the first golden rays of sunlight pierced through the fog, Amber decided to take Thunder out for a ride. She led him out of the barn, his black coat glistening with dew. "Ready, boy?" she asked, patting his neck. Thunder let out a low snort, his usual way of showing agreement. Amber mounted Thunder and guided him toward the trails that wove through the farm's expansive pastures. The ground beneath them was soft, dampened by the morning dew. Thunder moved with his usual grace, his ears flicking back and forth as if listening to every sound around them. About half a mile into their ride, Thunder suddenly stopped. Amber leaned forward in surprise. "What's the matter, boy?" she asked, tugging gently on the reins to urge him forward. But Thunder remained rooted to the spot, his ears pinned back and his nostrils flared as he let out a sharp whinny. Amber frowned. Thunder was never this stubborn. She glanced around, trying to figure out what had spooked him. The trail ahead was clear, flanked by rows of tall oaks whose leaves rustled softly in the breeze. There was no sign of danger, no movement that might alarm him. "Come on, Thunder," she coaxed, her voice gentle but firm. "It's just the trail." She tapped her heels against his sides, but Thunder didn't budge. Instead, he pawed at the ground with one powerful hoof, his movements frantic and deliberate. Amber dismounted, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. "What is it?" she murmured, stroking Thunder's neck to calm him. He pawed at the same spot again, his eyes wide with urgency. Amber's stomach tightened. Thunder wasn't acting out of stubbornness. He was trying to tell her something. Kneeling beside Thunder, Amber inspected the ground where he had been pawing. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. Compacted dirt, a few scattered leaves and small rocks. But as she brushed away the debris with her hands, she noticed something odd. The soil was loose, as if it had been recently disturbed. Amber's heart quickened. She grabbed a nearby stick and began digging, curiosity and unease battling within her. Thunder stood close, his large frame casting a protective shadow over her. As Amber dug deeper, a faint metallic glint caught her eye. "What on earth?" she muttered, pulling at the object with her fingers. It was an old rusted padlock, still attached to a chain. The chain disappeared into the ground, buried beneath layers of dirt. Amber sat back on her heels, staring at the padlock in confusion. Why would a chain be buried here? She glanced up at Thunder, who snorted and stamped his hoof impatiently. He was clearly not satisfied. "You want me to keep digging?" she asked, half joking. Thunder pawed the ground again, and Amber sighed. All right, let's see what else is down here. She dug deeper, her hands working quickly despite the chill in the air. The chain led to a wooden box, its surface weathered and splintered with age. The sight of it sent a chill down her spine. She hesitated. "What have we found, boy?" she whispered. Thunder let out a low whinny, his breath visible in the cool morning air. Taking a deep breath, Amber lifted the box from the ground. It was heavier than she expected, and the chain rattled ominously as it shifted. Setting the box down on the trail, Amber studied it closely. The padlock was too rusted to open, but the wood was fragile, and a few firm taps with a stick broke it apart. Inside was a jumble of objects, an old leather journal, a rusted pocket watch, and a small velvet pouch that seemed oddly pristine. Amber's hands trembled as she reached for the journal. Its leather cover was cracked and faded, but the pages inside were surprisingly intact. She flipped it open, her eyes scanning the first page. "To whoever finds this," it read in spidery handwriting, "you have unearthed a secret that must not be ignored. What lies beneath this field is both a warning and a promise. Proceed with caution." Amber's breath caught in her throat. A warning? A promise? What could this mean? She looked up at Thunder, who was watching her intently, as if urging her to continue. She turned the page, her heart racing. The entries that followed were a mix of cryptic notes, sketches, and maps. One sketch in particular caught her eye, a crude drawing of what appeared to be a cavern hidden beneath the fields of Willowbrook Farm. Amber's mind raced. Could there really be something buried beneath her land, something so important that someone had gone to great lengths to hide it? She glanced around the quiet woods, suddenly feeling exposed. "We need to go back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She packed the journal, watch, and pouch into her saddlebag and mounted Thunder. The stallion moved quickly, as if sensing her urgency. By the time they reached the barn, Amber's mind was a whirlwind of questions. What had she stumbled upon? And why did it feel like her life was about to change forever? Thunder, as always, stayed close, his presence a steadying force as she prepared to unravel the mystery. Amber had no idea that the answers she sought would challenge everything she thought she knew about Willowbrook Farm and herself. Amber spent the rest of the day in her farmhouse, poring over the journal she had found. Each page was filled with notes, sketches, and fragments of a story that hinted at something incredible buried beneath Willowbrook Farm. The author of the journal, a man named Jonathan Hartwell, had been a farmer who lived on the property over a century ago. His handwriting, though faint in places, painted a vivid picture of his life and the extraordinary events that had unfolded on the land. Amber's heart raced as she read one entry. "The cavern beneath the old oak holds the key to what my family has guarded for generations. But it is no ordinary treasure. If uncovered by the wrong hands, it could spell disaster." Amber leaned back in her chair, her fingers brushing over the leather cover of the journal. The old oak mentioned in the journal was still standing. She knew exactly where it was. It was one of the oldest trees on the farm, its sprawling branches casting a massive shadow over the northern field. The thought of something hidden beneath it both thrilled and unsettled her. She turned to the velvet pouch she had found in the box. Inside was a small key, intricately carved with symbols that matched some of the sketches in the journal. This must open something. Amber murmured, holding the key up to the light. Thunder, who was watching her from the window outside the farmhouse, let out a soft whinny. "You're not letting me face this alone, are you?" Amber said with a smile, her nerves settling slightly. She tucked the key and journal into her satchel and made her way outside. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the farm, but Amber couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a mystery far bigger than herself. Amber saddled Thunder again, the stallion's energy calm but alert, as if he sensed the gravity of the moment. Together they rode to the northern field where the ancient oak stood, its gnarled roots twisting deep into the earth. As they approached, Thunder slowed, his ears flicking back and forth. The closer they got, the more Amber noticed something odd. The air around the tree seemed cooler, and the ground was unusually soft. Dismounting, Amber tied Thunder to a nearby fence post and approached the tree with her satchel slung over her shoulder. The journal had mentioned a hidden entrance near the base of the tree, concealed by the roots. Amber knelt down and began examining the area, brushing away fallen leaves and dirt. After several minutes of searching, her fingers grazed something hard and metallic. Her pulse quickened as she uncovered a small rusted lock embedded in one of the roots. "This has to be it," she whispered. Pulling out the intricate key from the velvet pouch, she slid it into the lock. It fit perfectly. With a twist, the lock clicked open and a section of the roots shifted, revealing a narrow wooden hatch beneath. Amber's heart pounded as she pushed the hatch open. The smell of damp earth and old wood wafted up, and a set of stone steps descended into darkness. She grabbed her flashlight from the saddlebag, turning back to Thunder. "Stay here, boy. I'll be right back." Thunder snorted in protest, pawing at the ground, but Amber gave him a reassuring pat before stepping cautiously onto the stairs. The air grew colder as Amber descended into the hidden chamber. The steps led to a small stone room, its walls lined with shelves filled with dusty books, jars, and artifacts that looked like they belonged in a museum. At the center of the room was a large wooden chest, its surface etched with the same symbols as the key. Amber's breath caught as she approached the chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid, revealing its contents. Bundles of old documents, maps, and a collection of small ornate artifacts made of gold and silver. One artifact, a golden amulet shaped like a sunburst, caught her attention. She picked it up, feeling its weight in her hand. It was warm to the touch, as though it held some kind of energy. Her mind raced. Was this what Jonathan Hartwell had been protecting? And if so, why had it been buried here for so long? The journal's warnings echoed in her mind. If uncovered by the wrong hands, it could spell disaster. Amber sifted through the documents, her eyes scanning for clues. Many were written in an old formal script that was hard to decipher, but one stood out. It was a letter addressed to Hartwell's descendants, warning them to guard the artifacts at all costs. The letter hinted at the artifacts having been brought to the farm by Hartwell's ancestors, who believed they held a mysterious power connected to the land itself. "This can't be real," Amber muttered, though the weight of the amulet in her hand told her otherwise. She packed the items carefully into her satchel, knowing she couldn't leave them behind. As she climbed back up to the surface, the late afternoon sun had dipped closer to the horizon, casting long shadows across the field. Thunder let out a sharp whinny as she emerged, his stance tense and alert. Amber froze. "What is it, boy?" she asked, her voice low. She followed Thunder's gaze to the edge of the field, where a figure was watching her from the tree line. The person was too far away to make out clearly, but their posture was rigid, almost menacing. Amber's stomach twisted with unease. She secured the hatch and mounted Thunder quickly, urging him into a canter, back toward the barn. The figure didn't follow, but Amber couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Back at the barn, Amber secured the satchel in a locked cabinet and tried to calm her racing thoughts. Who was that figure, and did they know about the hidden chamber? She flipped through the journal again, hoping for answers. One entry caught her eye. "They will come for what lies beneath. If you are reading this, protect it with your life. The land depends on it." Amber closed the journal, her hands trembling. She had stumbled upon something far greater than she could have imagined, and now it seemed she wasn't the only one who knew about it. She glanced at Thunder, who stood watchfully near the stable door, his dark eyes meeting hers. "I don't know what we've gotten ourselves into," she said softly, "but whatever happens, we'll face it together." As the sun set over Willowbrook Farm, Amber prepared herself for the challenges ahead, unaware of just how deep the mystery would take her. The next morning, Amber woke to the sound of Thunder pacing outside the barn. His hooves struck the ground with an urgency that sent her heart racing. She hurried to his stall, finding him wide-eyed and restless, his ears swiveling in every direction. "What's wrong, boy?" she asked, stroking his neck to calm him. Thunder snorted and stamped his hoof, his gaze fixed on the field where the old oak stood. Amber followed his line of sight, spotting a faint trail of smoke rising in the distance. A chill ran down her spine. The smoke was coming from the direction of the tree line where she'd seen the figure the day before. Her mind raced. Had someone discovered the hidden chamber? Were they trying to force her hand? The artifacts she'd uncovered weren't just relics. They were the key to something greater, something deeply tied to the land. She couldn't let them fall into the wrong hands. Amber grabbed her satchel, which still held the journal and the golden amulet, and secured it across her shoulder. "Let's go, Thunder," she said, saddling him quickly. "We need to find out what's going on." Thunder galloped across the fields, his powerful strides eating up the ground beneath them. The smoke grew thicker as they neared the tree line, and the acrid smell of burning wood filled the air. Amber's heart pounded as she slowed Thunder to a stop at the edge of the forest. A small fire smoldered in a clearing, its flames licking at the base of a massive tree. Around the fire stood two men, their faces shadowed by the hoods of their jackets. One of them held a metal detector, sweeping it across the ground, while the other leaned on a shovel. Amber dismounted, keeping Thunder behind her as she crept closer. The men were speaking in low voices, but she couldn't make out their words. She crouched behind a fallen log, her breath shallow as she listened. "Gotta be here somewhere," one of the men said. "The journal said it was buried deep," the other replied. "Keep digging." Amber's blood ran cold. They had the journal, her journal. The only way they could have gotten it was by breaking into her barn. Her hand instinctively went to the satchel at her side. The artifacts were still with her, but the journal's loss felt like a gut punch. She had to act fast. Amber stood, stepping out from behind the log. "What do you think you're doing?" she called, her voice firm despite the fear tightening her chest. The men froze, their heads snapping toward her. The one with the metal detector straightened, his eyes narrowing as he took in her presence. "This isn't your business," he said, his voice low and threatening. "It is my business," Amber shot back. "You're on my property." The man with the shovel took a step toward her, his grip tightening on the handle. "We're not here to hurt you. We just want what's ours." Amber's heart pounded. "Yours? You mean the artifacts buried beneath my land? They don't belong to you, or anyone else for that matter." The first man smirked. "You have no idea what you've stumbled onto, do you? Those artifacts are worth more than you can imagine, but they're more than just treasure, they're power." Amber took a step back, her mind racing. These men weren't just treasure hunters. They knew about the amulet's significance. "You're not getting anywhere near them," she said, her voice trembling with defiance. The second man sneered. "You can't stop us." Thunder's loud snort broke the tension. The stallion pawed at the ground, his powerful frame towering over Amber. She placed a calming hand on his neck, but his presence bolstered her confidence. "You're wrong," Amber said, her voice steady now. "I can." Without warning, the men charged toward her. Amber grabbed a branch from the ground, wielding it like a staff. Thunder reared, his hooves striking the air as he let out a fierce whinny. The men hesitated, clearly intimidated by the massive horse. Amber used the moment to act. She swung the branch at the man with the shovel, catching him off guard and knocking the tool from his hands. Thunder moved swiftly, blocking the other man's path and forcing him to back away. "Leave now," Amber commanded, her voice filled with authority. The men exchanged glances, clearly calculating their odds. Finally, the first man spat on the ground. "This isn't over." With that, they retreated into the forest, disappearing among the trees. Amber's legs trembled as she watched them go. She leaned against Thunder, her breath coming in short gasps. "Good boy," she murmured, stroking his neck. "You were amazing." Thunder nuzzled her shoulder, his strength grounding her. Amber knew the men would be back. She couldn't protect the artifacts alone, not forever, but she also couldn't let them fall into the wrong hands. She made her way back to the barn, her mind racing with possibilities. There had to be someone who could help, someone who understood the significance of the artifacts. The next morning, Amber called Dr. Evelyn Marsh, a historian she had met during a community event in Cedar Ridge. Dr. Marsh had dedicated her career to studying local legends and folklore, and Amber hoped she would have the expertise to help. When Dr. Marsh arrived, Amber wasted no time explaining everything: the journal, the hidden chamber, the artifacts, and the confrontation with the intruders. Dr. Marsh listened intently, her eyes widening as Amber showed her the golden amulet. "This is extraordinary," she said, turning the artifact over in her hands. "The craftsmanship, the symbols. This isn't just a relic, it's a piece of history." "But what does it mean?" Amber asked. Dr. Marsh examined the journal, her brow furrowing as she read. Jonathan Hartwell's ancestors must have been entrusted with these artifacts for safekeeping. The references to power and the land's vitality suggest they might be tied to the region's natural resources, water, soil, even the crops. Amber's heart sank. If that's true, then those men won't stop until they get their hands on them. Dr. Marsh nodded. We need to secure the artifacts and alert the authorities. They'll investigate the men and ensure they don't come back." Amber agreed, but she knew the journey was far from over. In the weeks that followed, the artifacts were carefully documented and transferred to a secure location where they could be studied and preserved. The local authorities increased patrols around Willowbrook Farm, ensuring Amber's safety. Despite the chaos, Amber felt a deep sense of peace. The artifacts were no longer a mystery, they were a legacy. And thanks to Thunder, they had been protected. One evening, as Amber stood in the barn brushing Thunder's mane, she smiled. "You knew all along, didn't you?" she said softly. Thunder let out a gentle whinny, his dark eyes full of wisdom. "You're not just my companion," Amber said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You're my guardian." As the sun set over Willowbrook Farm, Amber felt a profound connection to the land, the past, and the future. She knew that as long as she and Thunder stood together, they could face anything.